Welcome back, everyone. So today we are going to create a very simple item, and I've got the tutorial all prepared. I've got notes and everything, so hopefully this will go off without any major hitches. So first off, we should create a class to store some string constants. I normally call this class names, and put it in a package called lib inside of our main package. So you could see this class is right here, and I've created a string constant to store the name of the item that we're going to create today, which is just going to be called tutorial item. Now, as I mentioned before, Forge now lowercases most things that you give it, so we are going to be sticking with lowercase letters and underscores for our names. Next up, we've got a class called mod items. This is fairly standard to have a class to store all of your items and stuff in, and we're going to have two methods in here for initializing our items. Now, this is a bit different from how I normally do it. I've got a lot of the registration stuff automated and wrapped up in silent lib here. So I actually had to go digging through silent lib to get these specific lines of code that we're going to need to register our items. And I think after I'm done with this, you're going to see why I wanted to automate it to some extent. So now I'm going to create a class for our item. You don't necessarily need a class for each specific item, but in many cases you really will want an item class, a class for each item. It is getting a bit late here, so I may be slightly incoherent, hopefully not. So I created an item package inside of our main package here, and typically, the naming convention for items is item and then the name of the item. So if your item was called levitation stone, then your class should probably be called item levitation stone. Obviously, you don't have to follow that convention, but that's what a lot of mods do. That's what I've been doing recently. I recommend it. And actually, that's how a lot of the items in Forge are named. So we are going to use item as our superclass. And here's our item class. So one little trick that you can do in Eclipse is Control-Shift-T. And this is the open type dialog. This is very useful. This will let you open classes. They can be classes from your own mod. So I could open the mod items class from here without having to go digging through the packages over here if I couldn't remember exactly where it was, but I could remember what it was called. Or we can open up the classes from Minecraft or Forge. So for example, there's an item coal, which is the item that's used for coal. So you can view the code it uses here. And so on and so forth. You could look at the basic item class, which is quite long. This is the class that we're inheriting from for items. And like I said, it's quite long. There's a lot of code in here. And a lot of things that you can do with items, for example, will be overriding methods to change their behaviors. So for example, there's a method, let's alphabetize these so I can find them, called onItemUse. And this is basically whenever you right click a block while holding this item, this method will get called. So you can put whatever code you want to happen when the user right clicks the item on a block in an overridden version of onItemUse. So for our tutorial item, there is one method at least I want to add, or override, I should say. We're going to override public string get unlocalized name. And it takes one parameter, an item stack, which we will just call stack. And in this case, we don't really care what the item stack is. we are just going to return item dot plus our resource prefix plus names.tutorial item. And what this will be is item.tutorial tutorial item. So our unlocalized name for this, when we actually load up the game, since we don't have a localization for this, the item name will actually be like that. The unlocalized name plus .name. We will add a localization in a little bit. So really quickly, why don't I show overriding the onItem use? Actually, let's do onItem right click instead. This is when you right click it just in the air or anywhere, really. So let's go ahead and copy that method right there, just for convenience. And let's put it up here. So we're going to use the override annotation again, paste that in, and now we just have to fill in the method body. In the item class, it doesn't really do anything, it just returns a new action result, passing in enum action result.pass, and the held item for the player. So we do want that to happen, probably. So we could just say return super.onItem right click and pass in that same junk. I also want to do one more thing. Let's take the player and oh, okay, so the mappings are actually a little bit out of whack here. You can notice that yeah, this isn't quite right. It's saying world item stack in. That's wrong. Let's go ahead and fix this first. So if you select a variable name in Eclipse and press Alt-Shift-R, you can rename it. And that'll pass on the rename down below. Occasionally it will... Okay, well that was actually my fault because I renamed it the wrong thing. That needs to be player. And that needs to be hand. Okay, so I'm using older mappings, and some things like the onItem right-click method signature has changed, so that's why the method names were screwed up, I assume. Okay, maybe now it'll make sense. So we're going to say player.send... is that not it? Add chat message. Thought it was send message for some reason. Like they changed it, but apparently not. So let's send them a new text component string and just say you used my item. It's pointless, yes, but we're just showing that you can override these methods to change the behaviors of the items. So we've got this item class, but it's not actually being added to Minecraft. So what we're going to do now is come over to our mod items, and we're going to create two methods in here. And don't worry, you don't have to create the new methods for every item. We're going to put all item registrations into these two methods. So let's create a public static void init. And you'll see that all of my mods have a mod items class with init in it. The second method I don't have. We're going to do a public static void init client. And like I said, I've got a lot of model registration automated. So I don't have this, but this is the solution I came up for this tutorial. We're going to give it one parameter, an item model measure. We'll just call that measure. And I'm also going to add an annotation to this. It's going to be side only, and the side it is on is side.client, because this method only needs to exist on the client side, and if it existed on the server side, it would just crash the game. So we don't want that. Now we need to to call these two methods somewhere, and where do you suppose we're going to call them? Well, I am going to call them in my proxies. So in common proxy, I want to go under pre-init and call mod items.init. Now don't get confused, I called this init and this init. I mean, the mod items doesn't have separate initialization phases really, it just has the common and the client versions. So hopefully I'm not confusing you with the names there. So our mod items.init goes in common proxy pre-init. Now under client proxy, I'm actually going to put the mod items client init under init. This cannot be done in pre-init. It will crash if you try. So we need to give it the item model measure. The item model measure we need to give it is Minecraft.getMinecraft.getRenderItem.getItemModelMeasure. And I'm passing that to the function so we don't have to type that out every time we need the darn thing. Okay, so we've got the methods being called in the appropriate places. So now we need to fill out the methods themselves. So for each item that we're going to register using this method, we are going to need 3 lines of code in init and 3 lines of code in init client for every basic item. Yes, it's not pretty. Okay, so under init, again, this is the common version. It's on the client and the server. So let's go ahead and create an instance of our item up here. The class is item tutorial, and we will call the variable tutorial item. So down here in init, we could assign that variable up above, but I'm going to assign it down here. So we're going to give it a value. Tutorial item is assigned a value of new item tutorial. Now we need to call tutorial item.setRegistryName. And this takes a resource location. We're going to give it a new resource location. And that resource location requires 2 strings. We're going to give it tutorial.modID for the first, and names.tutorialItem for the second. And you can see why we have the names class, because we are referencing this name in multiple places, so we don't want to make a mistake in one place and break the whole thing. One more method for init, we're going to call GameRegistry.register tutorial item. Okay, now we need to handle the client side of things. Our item is in the game, but it won't render anything except the infamous fuchsia and black checkered cube that indicates that the model has not loaded. So we need to tell it what model it is going to have and assign the model to that item. So we are going to create a model resource location object. Call it, we can just call it model and reuse that same one, just reassigning it for every item. So it will be assigned a new model resource location. This one also takes 2 strings, but it's a bit different than the resource location, even though model resource location inherits from resource location. I know, it's a mouthful. So we are going to give it tutorial.resourcePrefix plus names.tutorialItem. And we could actually, up here at this resource location, we could have just used that as a single parameter up here instead of that. So we could have done it like this. Either way works. But in this case, we do actually need to concatenate those 2 strings ourselves, because the second string needs to be inventory, all lowercase. If you don't do that, I believe it does not work. Now we are going to reference a class called ModelLoader, and we are going to say register item variants. The item we are registering variants for is tutorial items, and this takes a variable number of resource locations. So for every possible model that item can have, you need to specify it here. In this case, we've only got one model, so we can just say model. Otherwise, you could say pass in an array of model resource locations. Or you could just list everyone by hand. So for example, model, model 2, and so on. Finally, we need to register this with the mesher. So that's why we gave the mesher parameter up there, so we don't have to type in that big long chain of method calls. So we're going to say mesher.register tutorial item is what we're registering for. And this is actually the wrong method. Let me see if I can get to bring up the right one. So we need this one. So tutorial item, the metadata we are registering for is 0. This item doesn't use metadata for anything, and our model is model. And there we go. That should be everything we need for this item to be working. So again, we've got our tutorial item class, which is overriding get unlocalized name at least. I think you can also use set unlocalized name in this case and just pass it that. But overriding get unlocalized name is a better choice. Under mod items, we are registering the item with the game registry, and we are also handling all the model junk. In our common proxy under pre-init, we are registering our items with moditems.init. Under client proxy, under init, we are registering our models with moditems.init client. Now, we don't currently have the model, technically, or the texture. I am going to go make sure I've actually deleted those, which I haven't, and we're going to create them. Actually, I forgot we haven't actually created our resources folder structure, so this would be a good time to go over that. So previously we created a common and a resources folder. GitHub or GitKraken has added the .git, the license, and the README files from when I created the repo. I hope that turned out to be less of a train wreck after editing, but it was a bit of a train wreck when recording, but I'm getting sidetracked. So in a resources folder, this is where the mcmod.info file goes, and is structured like this. And I recommend you just go on to GitHub for this project, copy this file, and change everything you need. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just put your mod ID there, put your mod name there, and so on and so forth. So you also need a folder in here called assets, and make sure every folder in here is named exactly as I have here. Otherwise, it won't work. You're going to have a bad time. So assets, plural, all lowercase. Everything in here needs to be lowercase. In there, a folder with your mod ID, all lowercase. So in this case, it's tutorial. Remember, this needs to be exactly like your mod ID. If your mod ID has uppercase letters in it, this needs to be all lowercase regardless. In here, we have block states, plural, all one word, all lowercase. Lang, which I guess is singular, it's not really a word, all lowercase. Models, plural, lowercase. Textures, plural, lowercase. In block states, we're going to have block state JSON files, no other folders. Under lang, this is where localization files go. For the default American English, that is en_U_S.lang. Make sure that Windows doesn't be stupid and append a .txt to that. Make sure the extension is .lang. Under models, we need two folders: block, singular, all lowercase, and item, singular, all lowercase. These are where our model JSON files will go. Finally, under textures, blocks, plural, all lowercase. Remember, under models it was singular, but in this case it's plural, and items, plural, all lowercase. Again, make sure all the folders in here are named exactly as I have here. So for our item, first create a memeable texture. Ideally you want this to be 16 by 16, but any power of 2 should be fine. Just remember, if your textures are not 16 by 16, certain people will hate you. We will save this file under Resources, Assets, Mod ID, Textures, Items. Be sure it's saved as a PNG. In this case, we are going to name it tutorial_item. Next, we need to create the JSON file required for the item. Items require 1 JSON file and blocks require 3. I have a script that I use to create JSON files, and I went through and cleaned it up a little bit for you guys. It's in my scripts folder here. It's makejson.py. It's a Python script, so if you want to run this, you will need to install Python. It's basically just a simple-ish command line script. Again, I went through and commented it all, so hopefully that'll be easy enough to use. I will show a quick example here. So open the command prompt window, run Python, the makejson.py file. We are going to be making an item model, so tell it item, and give it the name of the item, tutorial_item. So that created the model tutorial_item using the texture tutorial_item. It is possible to tell it to use a different texture. So I put this in the output folder, and we will need to copy this over. You could set up the script so that it'll output directly to your resources folder. I like to copy them over by hand because more often than not, things go wrong at first, so it's good to make sure that everything is working well. So if we open this up, this is what the item JSON file looks like. It's fairly simple. These were a bit more complicated in 1.8 and 1.9. I think it was 1.10 where they were made quite a bit simpler to do a standard item. So we've got a parent, which is item generated, and we've got a single texture, which is tutorial:/tutorial_item. If yours doesn't look like that, with that being your mod ID and that being your texture name, something is wrong, and you should probably fix it. Now note that these JSON files are incredibly delicate. A single misplaced comma can break the entire file. So that's one reason that having a script to generate these files for you is a good thing. If you're not going to have that many, I mean, you can always just copy paste these files, rename them, modify them however you need to, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and copy this generated file to Resources, Assets, Tutorial, or your mod ID, Models, Item. Paste that in there. Now back in Eclipse. To make sure Eclipse sees the new files, right click or left click on your mod project, press F5. That will refresh any files. And we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and debug the client. Alright, so I've already got a world here, and I may already be holding our tutorial item because I was writing the code earlier and then just took it all out. So yes, we have let me bring that back up, an item.tutorial:tutorial_item.name in our inventory. And it should have a special right-click functionality which crashes the game. That was not intended. Okay, so we've generated our first crash. What do? Do you panic and give up all your work? No. Go down into console here and scroll up a ways, and it'll have some information about what went wrong in the crash. Here's one of our classes, item tutorial. That line in particular seems to be the problem. What's the problem? No such method error. Okay. Well, a no such method error typically happens whenever you, say, try to call a client-side message on the server or something like that. Why exactly is that a problem? Okay. So what I'm saying is that this should be player.sendMessage. Right? Okay, something bizarre is going on here. I think I know what it is. Yeah, I think I did not update our tutorial mod for the new mappings. I'm still using the old one. Yeah, okay, so that's my problem. That method got renamed, and that's why it's crashing. That is indeed correct. So that should be send a message. And let's try this again. Alright. So we got one little problem here. It displays the message twice. Why in the world does it do that? Well, that's because we're calling on item right click on both the client and the server, and we are giving the send message command on both the client and the server. So, oh, Minecraft music. Let's not do that. Here we go. So how can we fix this? Well, that's easy enough. So one of the easiest ways to check whether you are on the client or server is if you have a world object, you can say world.isRemote. So this will be true if you are on a client and false if you are on a server. So if I do this, this will only send the message if it's done on the client side. Now let's see, that works. And since it was doing it twice before anyway, we could do this on either the client or the server. I think the proper way to do this would be to do it on the server and let the server send that message to the client. And that's really all there is to say. One other thing we could do is add a localization. So under resources, we've got the lang file here. So let's go ahead and open that up over here. So do you remember what it was calling our item before? It was item.tutorial tutorial item.name. So in our localization file, we basically got a bunch of key value pairs. These are the unlocalized names on the left and the localized names on the right. So for each line of the localization file consists of an unlocalized name or key. And then we have an equal sign and the localized name for that language. In this case, it's American English. And the American English name for this item is going to be tutorial item. So with this single line added to our localization file, and let's go ahead and add an empty line at the end of the file so that GitHub will be happy. We should now have, when we launch the game, it should display tutorial item instead of the unlocalized name. And basically the reason that we have localization files is so that we could potentially translate our mods into multiple languages, and occasionally I'll have someone who will donate a Chinese localization file for one of my mods. I say donate, that sounds kind of weird, but that's kind of how it is. And in every localization file, the unlocalized name on the left will be the same. The localized name will be different for each language. And basically, Minecraft is just looking through localization, saying what language am I currently in, what file do I need to be reading, and what name do I need to display. That was probably a terrible explanation, but as you can see, we now have tutorial item instead of item.tutorial : tutorial _ item.name, which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Tutorial item is better. So that's all there really is to say. So again, I would like to point out how much code we have here just to register one item. This is one reason that I made Silent Lib. It's why I tried to automate a lot of this stuff, because if you've got like 100 items in your mod, can you imagine how big this file would be if you did this for every single item? So here's some homework for you. Can you find a way to reduce the number of lines of code that you will need to register each individual item? Can you maybe add some more functions to this class that will automate the process a little bit so that you only need to call 1 or 2 lines for each item? I can assure you it is possible. So I think that's really all there is to say here. Again, all the code will be available on GitHub. I haven't even uploaded the first episode yet, honestly. I've been in a good mood today, so I decided to record a couple episodes here while I can. Tomorrow I have to get up early for work, so that's not going to be fun because it's almost midnight and I have to be up at 6, and yeah. So once again, I'd like to remind you that there is a Discord server out there. Abbreviation is MMD. I forget what exactly that stands for. Minecraft Mod Development, I think. I will, if I remember, put the link to the website in the description, and then you can just click on the Discord link up at the top of the website. Or I might just put the link to the Discord server itself. You can go on there. There's a mod development channel where you can ask for help with developing mods. If you're unsure of how to solve a problem that's got you stumped, you can go on there and ask, and someone will most likely offer some assistance. There's some very great people on that server. I've been trying to contribute whenever I can as well. So again, go check it out. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and it was informative, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.